Let's go now. A little life out here. What the hell's going on out here? Hey, what about that now?
Hello everybody, welcome to the UK Packers podcast. As usual, I'm your host at SteeDiddy NFL on Twitter, and of course follow the group at UK Packers. That's it, thanks for tuning in. Oh god, that was a woeful game. I wouldn't wish that on my enemies. I like every game I approach it the same. I get my iPad out, I get my good notes app, and I go first offensive drive, and I list the first and 10, second and 20, blah 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 blah, which is pretty much first and 10, second and 20 is kind of how this game kind of went. And I said to myself, you know what, I'm gonna treat myself for this game, because it is a nothing game. The Packers are playing second or third stringers, and that's being kind. Clayton Tune is out there. People were like, why is Jordan Love suited up? Well, if Clayton Tune got pummeled into the ground and injured, well then Love would have to come out. Malik Willis has a shoulder injury, so he wasn't going to play. Josh Jacobs is being rested up. He's kind of the backup quarterback, as is Jaden Reed, and I imagine maybe that was the thing. Matt LaFleur also came out and said that had Jordan Love had to go into the game, he would have just handed the ball off every time and not thrown a single one. And that's why this was a nothing game from the beginning, which is exactly why there was no quick snappage for your big package before this game. Because why would we do it? Why insult your time? I'd say this time and time again. Just because you have a microphone and equipment doesn't mean you need to be releasing daily podcasts, weekly podcasts when they're not worth it. You wouldn't tune in. You wouldn't get any benefit from it. And anyone who knows me in real life knows that I am awful at small talk. I will get straight to the point, and I don't like sort of faffing around it. So this game was awful. I wrote the notes. I closed my app. I actually didn't bother watching the last part of the game because it was completely and utterly useless. Funny, all of the anecdotes and sort of conspiracy theories about the fact that the Packers kicked the field goal at the end so that they wouldn't cover the spread, and it was all for Vegas and all this type of stuff. It's a pride thing. Right, let's put down the tinfoil hats for a second. It's a pride thing. The Packers don't want to have a shutout, because all of the stats that come out with that, we did an Irish meetup once. It was against the Ravens, and Brett Hundley was out there, and it was a shutout against the Ravens. Just an absolute manky game. Probably murdered our reputation in Ireland for a while having a meetup for that game. But look, just an awful game, to the point where I was concerned that we would break punting records. And in fact, and I like him, Mick McQuaid put out a tweet and tagged us in it to say, Daniel Whelan etched his name into Packers lore with so many yards punting. It's not a good thing, right? That was not retweeted, because it's like saying, you etched your name into it with you're the interception leader for the Packers. You don't want your name put to that. But Daniel Whelan, great on the night, good punts, not what you want to see, a real nothing story. And in fact, and these things, because of the algorithm, they just feed the masses now. I mean, Vikings groups and comments were coming up on my Facebook feed, and the Vikings fans were scolding it and saying it was a great old thing, and anytime we beat the Packers is a good day. It just stinks. Game stinks. I mean, the notes that as I said, I shut my Good Notes app and I wrote the actual highlights on a postage stamp, and here it is. Sorrell was good when he played. That fumble was brilliant. But this was a game, sort of marked with mankiness. I mean, it's the worst since 2007 for a running back for negative yardage on a play, and that was Emmanuel Wilson when he ran for minus 18 yards on one play. And then even that one that Baron Sorrell came out and got that fumble recovery, forced a fumble. Tune comes out, and I believe there was an offensive holding, so it brought up second and 20 or second and 20, which is just sort of typical of how this went. Trayvon Diggs was out there. Nothing really to talk about there. The sad part about it is, and I will end this podcast because there's not, like, talking about the game, and I don't want to get into the Bears game too much because we're in the playoff 7th seed, all that kind of jazz. I don't want to get into that too much because I'd love to do more of a deep dive on this playoff game in quick snaps and make it a long snaps, because I think that's where the value really lies. But if you're a Vikings fan, and I know I said they were all scolding and they were saying it was great and anytime you beat the Packers and all that, putting it into perspective, this was nonsense. And in fact, you had Justin Jefferson out there going for over 1,000 yards. You had your quarterback in McCarthy, and I know he's dealing with an injury. He was out there and his decision making was poor, his throwing was poor, his accuracy was poor. If you're looking at this and saying to yourself, this is the future of the Vikings, I wouldn't be slapping yourselves on the back saying that it's great. Similarly to that game against the Bears. So we beat the Bears convincingly in our first matchup, and then when our second one swung around and the Bears again were slapping ass and saying that it was a great game, the Packers did everything in their power, including Romeo Doubs spilling that ball on the onside kick, to give that ball to the Bears. So I don't think it's a game that you look at that and go, oh great, we're trending in the right way. You absolutely are not, and that's the same with the Vikings. Two awful performances. So with that being said, the best case scenario for the Packers, I believe, and I don't know where we sit here, and I'll dig into the more detail on the quick snaps, but we're coming up against the Bears, and yay, right? Because we smacked them in the first game very convincingly, and then in the second game we did everything in our power to give the game away. Had we not done one of about 1 billion different mistakes to hand that game to the Bears, we would have came away with a win, coupled with the fact that the Bears had to win this week, or if they lost and the Eagles won, well then they would be supplanted for the second seed. The Bears lost against the Lions. And some of the stuff that we said, the Lions had nothing to play for. Dan Campbell is a proud man. He would want his players to play with pride, and so they still stuck it to the Bears. And like I say every time, the caveat that hangs over, divisional games is always you never know what's going to happen. It's weird. I mean, the Bears can suck, and they have sucked for many years, but then they come up against the Packers in a game where the Packers look to be dominant and we get spanked, right? That's just how it sort of pans out. But to say that the Bears went into that game at home needing a win to make sure that they can control their own destiny. Now, it just so turned out that the Eagles lost as well, so it didn't matter. But they didn't know that at that time, so they still had a lot to play for, and they still crapped the bed at home. And typical Bears fashion, I mean, there was a bit of escapism, there was some opportune sacks. They went to Loveland 1 billion times, and he got purchased. There was some scrambling off kilter plays, and they ended up coming down with it and making it close. But at one stage, that game was 16-0. So not to get ahead of ourselves, but I think certainly, look, at the end of the day, I would absolutely love to beat the Bears at home in the playoffs, because they go from worst to first, fair play, and then they talk an awful lot of trash. I do not believe in the Bears team whatsoever, and I say that as an analyst. I don't think, they're too inconsistent. There's too the game gets handed to them in an awful lot of areas. I think the plays that they made against Jordan Love in that last game was filthy. It looked to me like the player, if not the team, certainly had an agenda to put Jordan Love down. Again, not making any wild accusations that they meant to injure him, but that's what happened. And both of those were sort of low helmet hits. So come up to your own conclusion, but I think it was just manky play. So, I'm not a believer in this Bears team, and I think they can be beaten. And I think... it's great to have a good rivalry game. It's great to see them in the playoffs again, particularly when we have the opportunity to knock them out at the first count. So it'd be beautiful, poetic, if the Packers marched into Soldier Field and laid waste to them and then marched on. We already know that they'll face the Seahawks after. So if the Packers beat the Bears, and I will say if, they want to face the Seahawks, and because of the 7th seed, we have it very tricky from here on in, but that's just how we're going to have to do it, and I think the team are capable of it. But would I be surprised if a Matt LaFleur team went up against the Bears and laid an egg? Nope. Would I be surprised if they went in and absolutely trounced them? Nope, not surprised at that either. We really don't know what we're going to get in games like this. The only sort of good thing is that Jordan Love and some of the other players have been well rested over this last time. We've effectively given Jordan Love, albeit he's dealing with concussion, a little mini or double bye for him to try get healthy, to be in the best condition that he can. And that's including, Quay Walker and some of our receivers and stuff like that. So that's the positive note here. But it was terrible football, and it just goes to show you, the haters out there will try make you believe week on, week out, that week in, week out, that Jordan Love is a terrible quarterback and this is the Packers are not playing well. That game against the Vikings, watch that. In fact, I'm going to have it playing above the fireplace to stop the kids from getting burned from the fire, because there's no way a human in the right mind would go near a game that looks as manky as that. We put out a list last night. It's up there with root canals and, waving back at somebody who wasn't waving at you in the first place. It was just dreadful stuff. So if you want to see what a bad game is, watch that one and then put every other game into perspective. And it just goes to show you what a good quarterback and what a not so good quarterback is. And that's no massive slight against Tune, as you would call him in the States. It just goes to show what goes into playing NFL quarterback and sort of how good, I guess, Malik Willis is as well. But anyway, it was a nothing game. It was a nothing burger. The loss was irrelevant. It would not change our seeding. The Packers absolutely did it right by resting their players. So there's not much more to talk about in that regard. And in fact, it was a change of pace in the sense of Daniel Whelan was getting 0 game time because we weren't punting and we were still losing. There was a 4-game losing streak, whereas this time he got his practice in. So good game to rest Jordan Love. Good game to play Daniel Whelan. And we'll see what we come up against with the Bears. But I'll be deep diving that game, talking about the key matchups, looking at the history, looking at the games that we've played this season against them, diving into how the Bears have played on the run-in to get where they have gotten, and sort of back up my claims that I don't believe that this team are a true contender. And that's all to come in our Quick Snaps episode, which will be with you shortly, because we have that Saturday game. So it's a 1 a.m. game on Saturday. And I did see a comment out there, someone saying, oh, great, well then at least I can sleep through the misery. I don't know. I'm high on the Packers coming into this game. And I'm sort of low on the Bears. So I think that will come into it. And anyway, I'm insufferable at this time of year. You know, you can accuse me of being a homer. Have at it, because Packers in the playoff, it's a win or go home game, and once we get here, the only thing you can do at this stage is blindly believe. I'll break it down with analysis, but my conclusion will always be at this time of year, and if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you'll know it, that I'm going to tip the Packers to win every single game for the rest and all the way into the Super Bowl. Will they? Probably not, but I'm going to say it anyway. So there we are. Turned out to be 10 minutes more than I thought this podcast was going to be. I'm at Steady NFL. You are the best bloody listeners and fans ever. We are at UK Packers, and stay tuned because Quick Snaps is coming soon. Talk to you then.